Now, there's only one form of carbon capture and storage that works, and that's not extracting it in the first place. Geology is really good. The planet's geology is really good at carbon capture and storage. It's managed to keep this stuff in the ground for hundreds of millions of years, and that's where it should stay. And that's what has recalibrated Earth systems and brought them back into equilibrium, is burying atmospheric carbon under the ground. And what pushes them out of equilibrium is bringing that atmospheric carbon back out of the ground and back into the atmosphere. And it's so simple that stopping that process is the way forward. And yet we have, for instance, the government of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, saying our aim is to extract every last molecule of oil. And we had the former Energy Secretary in this country, Jacob Rees-Mogg, or Rees-Mogg as we call him, instructing his civil servants to extract every cubic inch of gas from the North Sea. Those are his exact words. Of course, he uses inches, not centimetres. So, and similarly with livestock farming, you know, the three mentions there's ever been of livestock in a COP agreement have all said livestock management. They never say about reducing the number of farm animals, which is absolutely crucial, both to preventing greenhouse gas emissions, because they account for about 20% of greenhouse gas emissions, and for protecting wider Earth systems, because livestock farming is the greatest cause of habitat destruction, wildlife destruction, species loss, and a whole water pollution, a whole series of other massive assaults on Earth systems. And we have these, now, well, you asked what about chemtrails? Sorry, chemtrails is a conspiracy theory. Right? The contrails from jets are causing major damage to Earth systems because they massively increase radiative forcing. And it's an extraordinary feature of the way in which some people are thinking, that they look up, see this enormous damage done by contrails, and come up with a completely different set of ideas about the damage they might be doing, that they're controlling our minds, or whatever the chemtrails conspiracy theory is. This is why it's so important that we follow the science. It's so important that we stick to the facts. It's so important that we take an empirical approach to what is afflicting the world and what needs to change. And unfortunately, there is just no empiricism when it comes to government action at COP or elsewhere. Now, we're aware that the COP process has its origins in 1992, but in fact the first intergovernmental summit on trying to prevent the collapse of Earth systems was in 1972. That's 50 years. 50 years of inaction. 50 years of promises which have not been fulfilled. 50 years of governments saying all the right things with no intention of acting on them, because they would rather see the collapse of Earth systems than upset their sponsors. And what we've seen throughout this 50 years is the power of money exercised over the power of democracy. This is a straight fight between democracy and plutocracy, and governments have allowed plutocracy to win. So where does change come from? It comes from us. Change never starts from the center, it always starts from the margins. That's how society works. It's like an amoeba. It moves from the margins, not from the center. And it's that leading edge of change which we represent, which Extinction Rebellion represents, which Fridays for Future represents, which Just Stop Oil represents, which Insulate Britain represents. These are the people being vilified today. Being vilified by governments, being vilified by the media, but will be seen in the future in the same light as we see the suffragettes and the civil rights campaigners.
Yeah.
And we know when we're having an impact because they ramp up the legislation deployed against us. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. They are so afraid of us that they're having to bring in the kind of legislation which would be familiar in a dictatorship, but has no place in a democracy. with the Police Act, with the Public Order Bill, these appalling draconian instruments against peaceful protesters, as if there weren't enough on the statute books already. This is a tribute to our success in changing the conversation. They are desperately afraid, not afraid of anarchy, not afraid of state overthrow. They don't believe all that stuff which they talk about. They're afraid of money being dethroned from its seat at the heart of politics. They're afraid of their corporate paymasters losing their businesses. They're afraid of legacy industries being retired. They're afraid of fossil fuels being left in the ground. They do not want change. They want business as usual. And we are here to say that is not viable and it is not going to happen. Because we are going to build movements that are big enough to reach the social tipping points at which change becomes inevitable.
Yay.
And we know, and this is where hope lies, roughly where those social tipping points are. There's been a wide range now of observational and empirical studies showing that it's about 25% of society. When you can reach about 25% of people with a new idea or a new perspective, there's a sudden social tipping into a new generalized acceptance of that idea or perspective. We've seen this many times before. We saw it with votes for women, we saw it with civil rights, we've seen it with decolonization, we've seen it with gay rights, we've seen it again and again and again across history, where what looked like an impossible situation suddenly, almost overnight, flips and becomes not just possible, but inevitable. And so our task is not to reach the person in the opposite corner. It's not to reach your grumpy brother-in-law who reads the Daily Mail. It's not to persuade our opponents. That's never how political change happens. And we've made a great mistake, I say we, primarily the sort of mainstream NGOs, the big conservation groups and the rest of it. A great mistake in that we have to meet them halfway. We have to compromise, we have to triangulate, we have to tell them things they want to hear, otherwise we'll be rejected. Their theory of change is completely wrong. They believe that we never had time for system change, that we just have to have incrementalism all the time. Throughout my 37 years working on this, I've been told we don't have time for system change. We never had time for anything other than system change. The only thing that works in politics is system change. And while our big NGOs have been pursuing incrementalism, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, then on the other side of the divide, the neoliberals, they've been pursuing system change and they've achieved it. They've changed almost everything. They've ripped down the administrative state. They've ripped down regulation. They've ripped down the taxation of the rich. They've destroyed trade unionism. They've attacked protesters. They've changed the whole system while we've been saying, well, perhaps another cup of tea? Yeah. We have to change the system, and we can change the system, because system change, when you understand social tipping points, is so much easier than incrementalism. It's actually the easy route, not the difficult route. This is a great mistake we've made in our theory of change. And what it also says is you never have to meet your opponents halfway. What you have to do is to preach to the choir, but make the choir bigger. And expand those concentric circles of social acceptance until you hit that 25% point, and then suddenly everybody else just sort of say, oh right, okay, the wind has changed, we tack round to catch it, and they fall into line and believe that they always thought what you now think. You know, they always, people just fall into line with it and change their sort of social political identity accordingly. That is how change has always happened. And society has undergone radical changes many, many times. And every time, people just thought, oh yeah, well, it's always been like that. They adapt to that change almost instantly. So we don't compromise. We don't triangulate. We don't try to meet the neoliberals or the reactionaries or the fascists or the conspiracy theorists halfway. We stick to our truths. We stick to what the science tells us. We stick to the empirical realities of the world around us, and we stick to the paths we know we have to follow if we're going to match those empirical realities with the political demands that inevitably follow from them. So we do not deviate from that determination to sustain a habitable planet, whatever it takes. To sustain a habitable planet, however many legacy industries have to be replaced by new approaches. However many legacy political structures have to be replaced by new, far more democratic structures. However radical the demand, if we know that demand is necessary to prevent the collapse of Earth systems, to prevent the collapse of human society, to prevent the collapse of this beautiful planet upon which everything depends, then that is the path we have to take. And we take it with determination. We take it with courage. But above all, we take it with love. And it's love that carries us through. We don't have to hate anyone. However odious we might feel our opponents are, we don't have to hate them. We carry on regardless. We ignore them and pursue our aims. And we don't get pushed off track by them coming in with all the trolling and the hate mail and the death threats and even the legislation. We don't let that deter us, because we know that what we're trying to do is much, much more important. And we know that if we pursue that, not with hate, but with love, then we attract other people to our cause and we stay true to ourselves. So don't give up. Expand the social circle, stick to your beliefs, although allow those beliefs to be affected by what we now know from, all as science changes, we adjust the beliefs to them, but we stick to the fundamental principle that we have a factually based, scientifically based approach and translate that into effective politics. But do so, above all, with determination, with courage, and with love. Thank you.